I hope you're happy. I hope you're really happy. You guys badgered me about this one, about Spoonie's review of this game and how he couldn't beat it without cheating, and there was no way I'd be able to beat it without cheating. Well, here you go. Today, we're playing the adventures of Bayou Billy until we win.
The Adventures of Bayou Billy.
This game is a pain in the ass. Originally released in 1988 in Japan as Mad City, The Adventures of Bayou Billy is Konami's American localization team's effort to not only localize the game, but to improve it. How did they improve it? Well, every enemy in the game has twice as much health as they originally did. Billy does half the amount of damage he does in the Japanese version. The enemies recover twice as fast from your hits and move twice as fast, which means if you hit an enemy, they can hit you right back. There's no recovery time and no chance to get out of the way. Entire parts of various stages have been changed dramatically. So for example, in Mad City, the swamp gators are things you could just skip by, but in Bayou Billy, you're actually expected to kill the damn things. In the shooting stages, you're given about half as many bullets as in the Japanese version, and enemies also move and shoot much faster. In the driving stages, your car tends to veer to the left or the right, and other cars on the road go kamikaze on you and try to drive into you. Or in the Japanese version, the controls are much tighter, and the cars don't try to dive bomb you. There are a lot of other subtle changes as well, but most notably, the localization team switched game types. Yeah, in Mad City, Game Type A lets you play the shooting stages with the controller, and Game Type B forces you to use the zapper. In Bayou Billy, the modes are switched. A uses the zapper, and B uses the controller. I have no idea why. Anyway, as you can imagine from all the changes, this game is really hard. It's hampered by poor controls, horrible hit detection, zero recovery time, and enemies that quite frankly have too much health or are nearly impossible to beat without the right weapon. This makes the Adventures of Bayou Billy hard for all the wrong reasons, but there are some tricks you can use that'll help you beat the game. So, the jump kick move is something I think a lot of us found to be very useful. The idea is simple. Once you're in a full jump kick, that is, your leg is extended and you've reached the peak of your jump, you're invulnerable. Before the peak of the jump, though, you can still be hit out of the air. Anyway, if you constantly jump kick back and forth, most of the regular enemies don't have time to recover, and you end up killing them in a few seconds. Of course, this doesn't work when a whole bunch of them are crowded together, since you can only hit one enemy at a time. Sometimes you'll notice that Billy doesn't always jump kick when you tell him to. He'll just jump up in the air without kicking. Now this took me a long damn time to figure out what was going on. It's actually a bug. If the knife is currently in the air, whether you threw it or an enemy did, Billy cannot jump kick. He just jumps up in the air. You have to wait for the knife to hit someone or hit the edge of the screen and land on the ground before you can jump kick. That's just fantastic. The other trick is something most people don't stumble across. If you time your kicks correctly while you move up and down on the screen, you can actually hit enemies while completely avoiding any counterattacks. This move does take a lot of practice, but it works against every enemy in the game, even the bosses. I can't really explain how to do it because it's all about timing, and the position you need to kick varies on the size and the speed of the enemies you're facing. Unfortunately, the only thing I can tell you is to practice this move until you're sick of it. Really, really sick of it. One of the defining features of this game is that you can use weapons. There's the stick, the gun, the knife, and the bullwhip. Now, there are only two weapons in this game that are actually worth any amount of time. It's the knife and the bullwhip. Yeah, I know, a lot of people like to use the stick because smacking people in the face with the stick is hilarious, even in an 8-bit video game, but the knife is actually one of the best weapons in the game, if only for one reason. It's practically the only way you can beat the first boss without absolutely mastering the kick move. The bullwhip is a different story. It lets you beat the crap out of enemies without getting close to them, and I think it's almost required to have to beat the final two bosses in the game. Unless, of course, you're a masochist. You have a gun in the game, which you can access by pressing the select button. You don't have any bullets at first, but if you beat a gun out of someone, you can pick up the gun and get 6 bullets. 2 bullets usually kills anyone on the screen, but unfortunately it doesn't really work too well against bosses and guys with bulletproof vests. I also really recommend getting the bulletproof vest whenever you can. It makes you invulnerable to knives, guns, and sticks. And one final tip, you should beat all 3 practice modes because you get some items that'll help you through the game. The beat 'em up stage gives you a meatball which refills your life one time, the driving stage gives you a 1-up, and the shooting stage gives you extra bullets. It doesn't matter which game type you play for the shooting stage as long as you beat one of them. Well, those are all the tips I can give you for this game. It's time we dove headfirst into it and beat the crap out of the adventures of Bayou Billy. The first stage is relatively easy. If you stick with the jump kick trick or the kick and move trick, you should really be fine right up until you reach the swamp alligators. For the most part, you can avoid the alligators, but there is one part where you need to kill them in order to continue. They're a pain in the butt to beat, so when you can, I recommend skipping them. When you can't, the trick to killing them is to stand as far away from the water's edge as possible while still being in kicking distance of the alligators. They'll bob around the screen and lunge out at you, but if you're in the right spot, the alligators will never touch you, and you can time your kicks as they lunge out at you. This method takes a while to beat them, but with any other method, the alligators will rip you to shreds, so you can take your time or you can die. The choice is up to you. Now the shooting stages can be a little tricky, but they're really not that hard. All I have to tell you is, don't die. Alright, there is a little trick to it though. What you have to do is concentrate on the people who are actually aiming at you. So for example, you have enemies that are running left and right on the screen. They're really not that big of a threat. It's the guys who are actually pointing the guns directly at you and the bazookas that you have to pay attention to. Kill those guys first and you'll be fine. The boss, on the other hand, well, he's really not that hard, because the trick with the shooting stages is that you just need to shoot the enemies before they attack you. Basically, if the helicopter turns to shoot you, all you need to do is shoot it first and you won't take any damage. The same holds true for the troopers that drop down. If they turn around to shoot you, shoot them before you take damage, and even if they're in the shooting animation with the muzzle flash, you won't get hurt. The next stage is another beat 'em up level, and it's really not all that difficult. It's the same stuff you've already seen. Of course, until you reach the boss. This guy is a real ballbuster. I think he's a mutant too, because his punch is as long as his kick, and both of which, by the way, are longer than your own range of attack. And if you get too close to him, he suplexes you. Ugh. The only recommendation I have for this guy is to use the knife. Just stay away from him as much as possible. But first things first, he's got a bulletproof vest on, which makes him invulnerable to knife attacks. You'll need to use the kick and move trick a couple of times to knock the vest off of him so you can pick it up for yourself. By the way, I don't recommend trying the jump kick or the kick and move tricks unless you're a Bayou Billy god. Now I know some players can pull it off, but it really requires a lot of practice and pixel perfect timing, and the less time you spend in close combat with this guy, the better off you are. The next 2 stages are the driving levels, and there's really not a whole lot to say about them, other than the fact that they take way too long, and the only real way to beat them is to play the hell out of them until you know in advance where all the tricky spots are. One thing you should know, though, is that once you throw a grenade in the air, you have to wait for it to explode before you'll be able to fire your guns again. You have to keep that in mind, otherwise you're going to end up getting killed more often than not. After you do your driving, you start fighting on Bourbon Street. You'll run into 3 new enemies here. Some guy that does nothing but run in and jab you with a knife, a guy with a ball and chain, and the hardest enemy in the game. The guys that jab you with a knife are easy enough to handle. They won't attack you until they're ready to run in and jab you, so once they run away from you, you can rush in and kick them to death. All you really need to remember is their timing. The guy with the ball and chain is fairly easy as well. I mean, he flashes red right before he's going to throw the ball at you. Just get out of the way before he attacks and you'll be fine. All you need to do is rush in and get as many hits in as possible before he attacks. The thugs, the most difficult enemies in the game, are really difficult to deal with. This is the first stage you can get the bullwhip, and I highly recommend using it as soon as you find it. Otherwise, you're limited to the kick and move trick, which is fine at first, but when there are 3 of these guys on the screen, things tend to get out of hand and you tend to die. The next level is another shooting stage, and it's pretty easy up until you get to the boss, and then things kind of go insane. There are 2 guys to deal with here. One of them walks around and shoots you, and the other one jumps around like he's hyped up on cocaine and throws daggers at you. The trick to beating these guys is to be fast, really fast, on the draw. Follow the jumping lunatic around and shoot him when he lands. That'll stop him from throwing the dagger at you. While the psychopath is in the air, shoot the guy with the gun. That'll usually stop him from shooting you. But his shooting pattern is actually so fast and erratic that you're actually guaranteed to take damage, so really focus on the guy with the knife. I'm not gonna lie here, this boss is gonna take a lot of lives and a lot of continues to beat. We're finally up to the mansion, and I have to admit, it's really not that difficult. Especially if you beat the last boss, who is just insane. But it can be a bit tricky. Really, the only thing I can recommend here is that once you get the bullwhip, do not lose it. The same thing goes for the vest, you're gonna need it. On the first screen, you have 3 guys with guns. Just take them out and you'll be fine. The next screen is 3 thugs. If you've got the bullwhip, you'll be fine. Just run away from them and smack them with the whip. The final enemy of this stage is a guy that sends attack dogs at you and swings a short whip. Just use the bullwhip to smack him around and kill the dogs that jump up and attack you. Once you beat him, grab the vest, go into the mansion. So you're finally inside the mansion and you're facing the guy that stole your girlfriend. And he's actually pretty pathetic. If you've got the bullwhip and the vest, he's an absolute joke because all he really does is jump around and shoot at you. Getting close enough to hit him with the whip, he'll jump around, making this more difficult than it ought to be, but it's not impossible, and eventually he'll die. The next boss, however, is downright evil. If you don't have the whip, I have no idea how you're expected to beat these guys. They're like evil 8-bit versions of Master Chief. They're 7 feet tall and protected by impenetrable armor. I'll be honest here, using the kick and move trick is really friggin' difficult. Because when you're getting close to these guys, they like to grab you, and instead of suplexing you, they'll wait for the other guy to come in and punch you like you're a meat bag. It takes really perfect timing to pull it off with the kick and move trick. Personally, I don't recommend it because using the whip is far easier. I mean, the whip makes this battle a joke. It makes it a really, really long joke, but it makes it a joke. Just run away from the 2 mecha gods and smack them with the whip, and repeat until they're dead. It'll take a while, but they'll die. Well, that's Bayou Billy in a nutshell, folks. If you don't know any of the tricks I mentioned, then yeah, the game is kind of hard, but really, once you learn these tricks, the difficulty eases up quite a bit. And now that I've beaten Spoonie's impossible game, can I please go back to doing some of the harder games on these systems? Oh, God. Oh, God, no. Oh, hell.